Thank you all for joining. Thank you for your patience in starting. It's also a good test because this is Israel after all. We don't always start right on time, or at least we start on Israeli Standard Time, always a few minutes, but thank you for your patience. Welcome and welcome back to Cafe Oleh. My name is Jay. Here at Cafe Oleh, we go over the everyday Hebrew you need here in Israel to succeed, whether that's reading and paying your bills, going grocery shopping and reading nutritional labels, keeping up with the news, striking up a conversation, flirting, dating, complaining, job interviewing, all the everyday things you do in your native language, but here in Israel in modern day Hebrew. As always, we want to hear from you what topics you'd like us to cover. You can always be in touch with us by email at hebrew@nbn.org.il. You can also, if you're joining us live on Zoom here, you can write to us in the chat with any comments, questions, concerns, requests you have. We always want to hear from you. Cafe Oleh doesn't work unless we hear from you what topics are most pressing to you. You can also, and equally important, check all of our previous lessons up on YouTube. Just go to youtube.com, type in Cafe Oleh. You'll see the very first result is a link to our playlist. We have over, I don't even remember how many videos we have now of previous lessons. Lots of viewers there. You can also write to us in the comments there. Take a look at all of our previous lessons. This lesson itself will be up in the next day or so. So you can watch all of our previous lessons up on review. The last 50 or 60 of them include the vocabulary spreadsheet we're about to go through. That's a great place to start if you have questions about requests for other topics for us to cover. Definitely look at YouTube to see when we last covered it, if at all, and then write to us. We want to hear from you. We'll also be in touch shortly with regards to the resumption of our Cafe Oleh conversations, which will be on Wednesdays at 8 p.m. local time, as well as our fall session that will begin shortly, right before the start of the fall holiday season, in which time we'll cover all the basics you need to know ahead of all the Jewish holidays in the fall, as well as all sorts of new topics, as well as review of previous ones and all sorts of new initiatives we have with Cafe Oleh. So you'll definitely want to stay tuned. If you aren't getting our emails, please again write to us at hebrew@nbn.org.il. We also have our own website on the Nefesh B'Nefesh website, simply called Cafe Oleh. So you can always find us simply by a simple Google search. With that, let's get started. As I said this week, we're going to do a topic we actually covered a long time ago, and we haven't done for a long time, which is really important. And it emphasizes one of the things I think is really amazing about modern Hebrew and the modern state of Israel is the everyday mundane things I think are the most interesting. And what do I mean by that? I think when we do nutritional labels and we talk about and we go over the words in Hebrew for elements and minerals, I think that's awesome. Because if you're coming from a perspective that Hebrew is connected to religion and Jewish identity, which it is, and it's inseparable from, the two are inseparable from each other, but you view it in historical or religious or spiritual terms, that's great, but that's only one part of a living language. Another part of a living language is the everyday things. One of those is minerals and vitamins, and one of those many other topics is what we're covering today, which is crime and the law. No less important in any society you live in to understand how it works or what doesn't work, or at least to understand some of the framework going into it, as well as some very basic expressions, but also when you're watching the news, for example. Israel is not immune from crime. And I think that's a really important thing also to say to fellow Olim by choice and fellow potential Olim from Western countries here on our call or from wherever you are in the world, to understand we have perhaps a dream, a vision, an ideal of Israel, and we also have a reality. And sometimes the two meet and sometimes they don't. And when they don't, we can't take that to mean that we failed or the state failed. It means that there's room for growth. So yes, crime in Israel does indeed exist. That's not a good or bad thing, that it simply exists. If you want to change it, if you don't want there to be crime, you can't say, well, I don't want to learn those words. We once taught, when we were teaching in person in Tel Aviv, someone didn't want me to teach curse words. And I said, I get that, but I'm not asking you to say them, but they certainly will be said, and they will be said in your immediate vicinity. So you should understand what's going on. You may not be committing crime. Hopefully you're not, but crime is committed in Israel. So you need to understand the words that go along with it, whether you're reading the news or you yourself need to report to the police. I'm going to teach you that expression today as well. Okay, so with that, I'm going to share my the vocabulary for today. As always, you're welcome to screenshot, old school pen and paper, or just wait for the PDF attachment that will come with the recording of this class. So with that, let me open it up. Here we go. So we're going to talk about two different aspects of, as I said, crime and the law. So first, we're going to talk about an important part of it, which is, see if I can move that around a little bit. I can't. Hold on just a second. Sorry, I'm just going to move that one, the spreadsheet out, so it's its own separate window. It'll be much easier for me to see. Okay, let's try that again. If that. Okay, move this down as well. Wonderful. Okay, so let's start at the top. As always, Hebrew is in the middle, English on the left, transliteration on the right. Any gender is on the left. Some of the words won't have gender because they're verbs and they're in their infinite form. And I'll obviously explain words as we go. So first off is all the words that have the same root, right? In Hebrew, we talk about this all the time. Hebrew words are comprised of two things: a root, a shoresh, usually 3 letters, and a mishkal, a form that it takes, the vowels that go with it, the helper and placer letters that go before and after and in between the shoresh letters as well. Okay, so first off is the word shitul. Shitul is starting off our group of words that have the same root of shin, tet, resh, and you probably know some of these. But shitul is the act of policing. Okay, it's the act that the policing authorities in Israel do. Okay, the one that you know the best is hamishtara. Mishtara, mishtara, mishtara. They're all the same ways, no matter how you say the letter resh for the word police. This is the body police. This is not an individual policeman or woman. We'll get to that in a second. This is the police. In Hebrew, as you'll get to in a second, how you say Israel police, but police is in any place, right? Hamishtara hamekomit, the local police. This is the body that does the policing. Okay, an individual policeman is a shoter. An individual policewoman is a shoteret. Okay. Sorry, just 1 second. There we go. And the name for the Israel police is Mishteret Israel. We're going to talk about how it's broken down in a second, but the entirety of the police in Israel is known as Mishteret Israel. It's important to understand, as we're about to talk about, there is no individual units. There is no Mishteret Tel Aviv. There is no Mishteret Yerushalayim. There's no such thing as the Tel Aviv police or the Jerusalem police that don't have any connection with the opposite. There's only one police in Israel, Mishteret Israel, that's broken down into subdivisions we'll talk about in just a second. Another form of policing that takes place in Israel that is essentially split between the police and the army is called Mishmar HaGvul or Magav. Mishmar HaGvul, Mishmar is a patrol or guardian, and Gvul, border. Mishmar HaGvul is border patrol. It's known as its abbreviation Magav, and Magav sits between the police and the army organizationally, and typically it sits on the border. So you'll see it a lot, for example, in Jerusalem and along the Green Line separating pre and post 1967 Israel. You won't see it in the depths of Israel necessarily, unless there's something going on that either they're called up for additional forces or something that affects their mandate, which is much more about patrolling the borders within Israel, meaning the Green Line and so forth. Okay. Mishteret Yisrael, the Israeli police, is broken down into three subdivisions. The first one is a machoz, and we've talked about mechozot before. A machoz in Hebrew is a district. Israel is split into 7 districts for judicial and police issues, for law enforcement. There are 7 of them. South, Jerusalem, Center, Tel Aviv, Coastal, North, and Judea and Samaria. 7. Okay. Within those mechozot, there are milchavim. A milchavim is best thought of as a precinct. In that, for example, Mechoz Tel Aviv or Mechoz Dan, there are 3, if I'm not mistaken, milchavim. And then within the precincts, there are individual tachanot, stations. Okay, so out of the 7 districts, we have each one is broken down into further precincts, and then that one is a station. However, again, you aren't conscripted or you aren't employed by Mechoz Dan or or Merchav Dan or Mechoz Chof. You are employed by Mishteret Yisrael. It is one police body that is organizationally broken down into 3 sections. That's an important distinction between many of the countries from on this call, where you have the New York City Police, right? The New York City Police is different than the Albany, New York Police, which is different than the Buffalo or the Rochester Police, right? Those are individual, independent policing systems. In Israel, it's one big one that's just broken up organizationally into 3. Okay, let's talk about some other words we need to know. Achifa. Achifa is a really important term when we talk in Israel about everything, not just policing, but in general law. Because one of the ongoing issues, oftentimes people will say that Israel has a problem with achifa, enforcement. We have important laws on the books, we don't have enough achifa. Achifa could be anything from a policeman or woman doing their job to someone didn't pick up after their dog, right? The law is you have to pick up after your dog. There's no one who's enforcing that in a given area, potentially. That's not always true everywhere. Some places that is. Who enforces the law? Okay? Who enforces the law, or gormei achifa? A gorem is an official. Okay, gormei achifa, which is a compound noun and it's pluralized, are law enforcement officials. The law part is implied, but when you simply say gormei achifa, law enforcement officials. Nayedet, it's there, it's an important word, is a patrol car or a mobile unit. It comes from the same word nayad, which is the word we use, for example, your laptop computer is a machshev nayad, because you can pick it up with your yad, your hand, right? That's where it comes from. A telephone nayad is a mobile phone. It's something you pick up with your hand and you can take it elsewhere. Nayad simply means mobile, but a nayedet is always referring to a police patrol car. Okay, so if you see a police car, you're not going to translate it literally from English into Hebrew. You're going to simply say nayedet. Nayedet is understood to be a police patrol car. Okay, a bunch of words. We've talked about this word before. A report or a citation is a duach. Duach or doch is an abbreviation for din v'cheshbon. Din meaning judgment, cheshbon an account, right? This is the closest we get to words like accountability in Hebrew. Doch or duach can also mean a report in the sense of what you're giving at your business or at a stakeholders meeting or anything like that. But if you get a duach on your windshield, that's a citation, meaning you are getting a fine. It's still called a duach. Ne'etzar is stopped or arrested. This comes from the same verb, by the way, as la'atzor, right? We've talked about this verb before. La'atzor with an ayin means to stop in place, but it also means to arrest. So a hashoter atzar kama anashim. The policeman arrested several people. Kama anashim ne'etzru. Several people were stopped or arrested. Okay, that's how you do it. Ne'etzar is the passive. Atzar would be the active. And equally passive, shuchrar. Shuchrar is released. Okay, we're going to get to these two actually in a little bit. I'm going to take this off right now because we're going to come back to these in a second as a sentence. One of the, when we were talking about this several years ago, was in the context of various ways in which people have gotten arrested. And we're going to go through other forms of crime in a bit. This isn't necessarily crime per se. Some of these are considered a crime. But often the times when you hear about people being stopped or arrested in the news, not always, but still important to know. We have 4 different ways in Hebrew of talking about disturbance, public disturbance. And when I say public disturbance, I mean a group of people. Mehuma. Mehuma is chaos, rabble, or riot. A mecha'ah is absolutely legal in Israel. That's an important one, unless it's declared illegal by the police because they don't have the right permits or they've trespassed over a given area that was marked for them. But a mecha'ah is a protest. It is not illegal. We're not talking about illegal versus legal quite yet. Just as a hafgana is a demonstration, is not necessarily legal or legal. However, what can be illegal is a ktata. A ktata, very hard word to say, and rightly so, is a fight or scuffle or brawl. When you see the word ktata in the news, it usually implies a group fight, scuffle, or brawl. So for example, in Tel Aviv last weekend, there was a ktata ben plitim eritreim, among Eritrean refugees, Bidrom Tel Aviv, in the south of Tel Aviv, right? Ktata is a scuffle or a brawl or just a big fight, physical fight. Okay. Ktav Ishum is a writ of guilt or an indictment or a charge. Ashma is guilt. The verb that I didn't include here is lahashim, to indict, meaning to cause someone to be guilty. Ashem is guilty with an aleph. Ashma is guilt. Okay. And what I just deleted because I want to give you the full sentence is this. And this is an important one. When we talk about turning our classes into something practical, this, unfortunately, for some of us, we are going to need to do this at some point. And it's an important one. Ani rotze lahagish tluna. This is a hard word, this last word, which is a complaint. To complain in Hebrew is lehitlonen, and we've talked about in more lighthearted classes about how that's such a difficult word to say that some Hebrew learners have elided that lamed into something else and meaning something very different and very inappropriate. The word is tluna. We don't have in English many words that are the sound t, l without a vowel in between. In Hebrew, we do tluna. Okay, that is a complaint. If you need to complain to the police about something that involves potential criminal charges, someone robbed you, someone assaulted you, someone extorted you, someone committed fraud against you, you will have to physically go to the police, to one of those tachanot, a station, and you'll need lahagish tluna, file a complaint. Lahagish is to serve, right? But in this case, file. Ani rotze lahagish tluna. A female would say ani rotza lahagish tluna. Okay, lahagish, to serve or to file, tluna, a complaint. Okay, that's a little bit of policing. Let's do a little bit of the law side. Chok is a law. Chokim are laws. Choki, with that yud at the end that indicates the word is likely an adjective, means legal, right? If something is of the law, it's legal. The opposite in Hebrew is bilti choki. This is a really important one. This is one that is not lo, it's bilti. We've talked about the word bilti before. This is the equivalent, as you see here in English, as ill or un or im, like bilti efshari, impossible. In this case, it's bilti chuki, illegal. Okay, if you were going to conjugate this, it would be bilti. Bilti would stay, and chuki would conjugate. So just as it's chuki, chukit, chukim, chukiot for legal, illegal would be bilti chuki, bilti chukit, bilti chukim, bilti chukiot. You're talking about activities, people, matters, whatever you want to identify as illegal, bilti chuki. Din is not the same thing as chok. Din is judgment in modern Hebrew. Knas is oftentimes the same thing as a doch or duach, meaning it's a fine. Arar is an appeal, coming from the verb le'arer, to appeal something. Here are some other forms of crime. We're not going through all the forms of crime. These are ones that unfortunately you read a lot about in the news. These are perhaps more quote unquote white collar crimes, but they still are important. And they are important, not but, and they are very important. Lashon diba. Lashon diba is defamation or libel or slander. This is not the same thing as lashon hara. When lashon hara is filed as a legal complaint, it often takes the form of lashon diba. Diba, or simply the word diba, which means libel or slander, right? Someone has said something not only offensive, but incorrect about you in that respect. Hona'ah is fraud. Schita. Schita comes from the verb lischot. Lischot is to squeeze something. So for example, when you go get fresh juice in Israel, it's going to say mitz sachut tari. Mitz juice, sachut squeezed, tari fresh or freshly, right? So freshly squeezed juice, mitz sachut tari. Lischot is to squeeze, and so schita, the act of squeezing, is also in crime terms blackmail, extortion, a shakedown, racketeering. All these terms, schita, right? The act of squeezing someone or something. And then finally, halbanat hon, money laundering, as opposed to money laundering, right? In English, we use the word laundering, and we can think of, right, washing money. In Hebrew, it's not washing money, it's whitewashing money. Lehalbin is to cause something to be white, lavan, right? So from the word lavan, we get the verb lehalbin, to whitewash or to turn something white. In this case, what are we turning white? Hon. Hon is actually an Aramaic word. Hon means capital, money, a lot of money, right? So if you are committing or you are accused of halbanat hon, you are accused of money laundering, whitewashing money. Okay. Olech din, orechet din, orchei din, orchot din. All of these are the word for lawyer. Israel is one of the largest per capita populations of lawyers in the world. If you're not a lawyer on this call, I'm sure you know at least a few. Olech din, orechet din, orchei din, orchot din. Often abbreviated like this. Ein Vav Dalet is a lawyer. Okay, when you see that on a sign, it means a lawyer, and they usually sit in a lishkat orchei din, right? A lishkat orchei din is a law firm. Lishka is simply an office. A lishkat orchei din is an office of lawyers, a law firm. Okay. Prosecution is the praklitut, ha-praklitut, prosecution. A prosecutor is a praklit, praklita, praklitim, praklitot. Okay, as you can hear in the word, it is not Hebrew in origin. We've adopted many of not just our legal norms and customs and laws from previous empires that ran this country. So the British, the Turkish most recently, but also our terms come from other systems like the Romans and Greeks, right? So praklit, Praklitut and Praklit, Senegoria and the Sanegor are the defense and the defense attorney. Sanegor, Sanegorit, Sanegorim, Sanegoriot are the defense attorneys based on their gender and numbers. Okay. A judge is a shofet, female judge, shofetet. Shoftim are judges. Shoftot are female judges. In Israel, we do not have juries. Chaver mushba'im. We only have judges who sit on courts in odd numbers, depending on the scope and size of the case in front of them. Very important here. There are two terms in Hebrew that can get mixed up, and they're really important to distinguish, even though you'll often hear them being used interchangeably. And I'm going to put them here so I make sure it lets me write in English. Come on, keyboard. There we go. Okay. What is the difference between a Beit Din and a Beit Mishpat? In English, these will often both be translated as court. That is incorrect. A court, in the way that we know a court in the judicial system in other countries, is a Beit Mishpat, and we'll get back to that in a second. A Beit Din, some people would translate as a tribunal. It's best understood in the Israeli legal system and judicial system to understand a Beit Din as a specialized court. So for example, there's a Beit Din LaAvodah, a labor court. There's a Beit Din, La Mishpachot. There's a specialized court for families. Beit Din is also, by the way, for religious terms, right? The rabbinic courts, the courts that need to decide on matters of Jewish and halachic issues, is also a Beit Din. Okay, Beit Din in Israeli legal terms refers to specialized things that aren't necessarily, that don't fall out of Israel's legal code, but have specialized considerations with them. But the general courts on the various different levels, and we'll get to that in a second, is a Beit Mishpat. The lowest level of the courts in Israel is called a Beit Mishpat HaShalom. This is the city courthouse. Remember, we talked about those three levels of policing, Mechoz, Melchav, Tachana. It's the same thing here, except in the reverse. Tachana would be the same as Beit Mishpat HaShalom. Every major city has a Beit Mishpat HaShalom. Tel Aviv has one, Yerushalayim has one, Rishon LeZion, Ashdod, and so forth, right? Beit Mishpat HaShalom, Tel Aviv. That is the Tel Aviv city courthouse. The next level up is the Mechozi, okay? And as opposed to before, the mid-level is the district courthouse, right? The district courthouse is the one that hears the appeals from the city courthouse. And then the last and the ultimate court that hears any appeals from the district courthouse is Beit HaMishpat HaElyon, literally the Supreme Court. Why is that important? Because the Supreme Court in Israel has two functions. Beit HaMishpat HaElyon, that's one of its names, and the other name is Beit HaMishpat HaGavoa LaTzedek. Beit HaMishpat HaElyon is understood as the Supreme Court with regards to appeals from the other levels of court, from the district and city level. Beit HaMishpat HaGavoa LaTzedek are when lawsuits and complaints are brought up against public bodies. So that could be an appeal against a law passed in Knesset, or the activities of a certain governmental agency on any level, local or national. That's where we use the term Beit HaMishpat HaGavoa LaTzedek, or known as Bagatz. But it's important to understand that the Supreme Court in Israel serves two roles, just like in other countries. It's both the top appellate court, and it's the first and only line when you're doing direct appeals against, for example, laws, the constitutionality of laws, even though Israel doesn't have a constitution. Okay? That's these terms. I know this is a lot of terminology and less practical things, but when you're watching the news, for example, I picked up, for example, today, Channel 12 has a website, and on their website, they have one section that's all about crime. These words are going to help you understand. For example, understanding who was arrested and why were they arrested. Where is their case right now? Where is it being heard? Who's upholding the arrest? Who's the local both police authority and the local judicial authority? Right? These are all terms that are going to come up on a regular basis at the very basic to understand the news and then to understand things around them. But the most important one, unfortunately, but it's an important one, just like we've done emergency numbers in the past. Remember that class where we went through all the major emergency numbers? God forbid you have to use them, but you need to know them. God forbid you ever have to use this sentence, but you do need to know it. Living full-time in Israel, ani rotze or ani rotza lahagish tuna. I want to file a complaint, which you'll do in person at the local, at the nearest tachanat mishtara, right? Tachanat mishtara, police station. Okay. I see we have a bunch of questions. I want to stop here and start answering them. Okay. By the way, this is your chance. If you wrote questions to me for this class in the chat, please write them in the Q&A. I'll be looking at the chat later. What is the predominant crime? Theft. That's a great question. I honestly don't know off the top of my head. Theft, which is known in Hebrew as either gniva or shod, robbery or theft. I don't know if that's the top one. I see a bunch of questions about the conversations. Folks, if you haven't been getting the emails, that's because we took a break. So the reason why it's not on the calendar and you haven't been getting emails, as we said in our conversation class, we're resuming on September 11th. You will get emails and requests to join if you would like. We'd love to have as many of you as possible, both returning and new. Please discuss wording used for ordering home security systems in Israel. Great question. So the word for security in Hebrew, great question, is avtacha. I'll make this bigger in a second. Avtacha, right? The word that you're probably thinking of is bitachon. These two words get interchanged a lot and used interchangeably quite a bit. Sorry. There we go. Avtacha. Avtacha is the word we normally use for security force. Right? Avtacha as opposed to bitachon. Avtacha is the security force. Security. Whereas bitachon is both security, even though it's the name of our defense ministry in Israel, right? Misrad HaBitachon is the defense ministry. We have the other word Hagana, which is defense. But when we're talking about bitachon or avtacha, we're talking about being batuach, safe, right? Batuach means safe, secure, right? And from the same root, we also get the word bituach, insurance. All of these have the same root, right? Bet, tet, chet. We also get the verb levateach and lehavtiach. Lehavtiach and leavteach. A lot of words that have to do with security and safety come from this. Leavteach. Levateach is to ensure. Lehavtiach is to promise. And havtacha is a promise to cause something to be batuach, to be sure, to promise. And leavteach is to secure. Okay, so when we're talking about a system at home, usually we're talking about something along the lines of a ma'arechet. I'll make it bigger, don't worry. Ma'arechet avtacha or avtachat bait or avtacha beitit. Right? It'll either be in the compound noun form or simply a noun and adjective form. Ma'arechet is a system. Okay. And avtacha is security, bait, house. So either home security or homely security. Either way, this is how it's going to usually be known. Home security system. I can't speak more to the details about what it entails and how to order it, but this is what you want to do when you start doing your own chipus, search for a מערכת אבטחת bait or a מערכת אבטחה ביתית. Great question. Okay. How do you address a policeman or woman? How do we refer to them as officer? You can say shotel. In Israel, they do have a nameplate on their uniforms, so you can say shotel, or you can simply say Adoni hashotel. That's very old-fashioned, or Gveret hashoteret, but simply shotel or shoteret followed by their last name. Is the command to stop by a police officer also netzal or another word? Great question. So as I said, remember, ne'etzal, and we've actually talked about the command form before when we did our imperative class, so it's also a great reminder to review our previous lessons. Ne'etzal is stopped or arrested. Not only is it the past tense, it's also passive, as I explained before. If you want to say stop, as in a policeman or someone is telling you to stop in place, that is atzol. So for example, if you approach a checkpoint in the road or a stop point by the police, it'll have a big sign that says atzol, stop. Atzol is technically the male singular form of the command, but it's understood to apply to everyone. Okay, great question. Can you go to a police station to file a complaint against the actions of the police? If not, where do you go? Great question. Complaints against the police, you go to Machash. Machash is the internal police investigations division, right? It's the division that checks the quality and behavior of the police. Internal police. Internal police. Investigation unit. Okay, in Hebrew it's called Machash. Machash. This is separate from bringing up a civil charge against the police. They have their own investigation unit. Okay, I see it got cut off. Let me just do that. Okay. Do you have an example to show us of a typical fine one might receive and how to go about paying it? Thankfully, no. Thankfully, no. The most common one would be a parking ticket. The parking ticket, and you can see this if you go on your local municipality's website, it will have an entire screenshot and instructions how to understand and pay your parking tickets. It'll look like a stub. It'll say on it the time. It'll say the amount that's due and how to fill it out and pay it online. If you want to appeal it, that's when you would go to the local courts. But no, I unfortunately, or fortunately, a great question. Can you explain those dashes around the district court? What goes in those blank spaces? The name, right? A city courthouse isn't going to have the same name. Beit Mishpat Shalom Tel Aviv is different than Beit Mishpat Shalom Yerushalayim. Those dashes are simply filling in the name of what the district of the city or the district courthouse. This is just because I already wrote Beit Mishpat, but I'm happy to write it again. Beit Mishpat Mechozi, Yerushalayim. Okay, that's just how it's going to be filled in with the specific name of the court that you need to appear at. How do you know when to add the hey or the ta for making a noun or verb female? Great question. So I'm going to do this the easiest way possible by doing the last word I just put in here. Avtacha beitit versus avtachat bait. As I said, the difference between these two is grammar. Let me make this bigger so you can see. And I'll make this like that. Sorry, let me just make this a little bit easier to read. Okay. Avtachat bait. Avtachat bait, our first example here, is a compound noun. Avtacha and bait are both nouns. To turn them into a compound noun, a word, the first word in the series that begins with a hey turns into a taf. Avtacha, right? I just said was security. In a compound noun, it'll become avtachat. It'll turn into a taf. The second word remains the same. If it's a noun and an adjective, avtacha beitit. Avtacha is the regular noun. Beitit is we've turned a noun into an adjective, right? Bait is a house. Beiti is house as an adjective. Homely, homish, homesque, however you want to turn home into an adjective. And it's avtacha beitit because avtacha is female. And so it has to agree. Beiti, beitit, beitim, beitiot. Right? We've talked about this before. You can create all sorts of new adjectives out of nouns simply by adding yud or yud taf at the end of the word, male or female, masculine or feminine. Avtachat bait, however, is because it's a compound noun. And the hey in the first word has to turn into a taf. Okay, more questions. Is there a system of arbitration mediation to try to settle things outside of the courts? There absolutely is. In Israel, there is arbitration and mediation. It's usually more mediation than arbitration. There isn't as much arbitration in Israel. There is the labor court, Beit Adin La'avodah, which sits in Jerusalem, but there is mediation in Israel, which is called Gishul. Mediation, and it can have the weight of the law, assuming all sides agreed to it. Gishul comes from the same root as gesher or ligashel. Gesher is a bridge, right? Gishul. Ligashel is to bridge, right? To bridge between two parties. In this case, gishul is mediation. Great question. How do judges determine constitutionality without a constitution? Great question. That is what we've been talking about for the last 2 years before the start of the war. Everything that was happening last year with regards to it. In the last 9 minutes of this class, I don't have enough time to talk about it, but a great topic for a future lesson. Where can I find the 911 session? Like all of our previous lessons, great question. YouTube.com, type in Cafe Oleh. I think it was called emergency numbers. So type in Cafe Oleh emergency numbers. Okay. By the way, it's not 911 in Israel, so I don't want to use that term, emergency numbers. What's the best, friendliest way to address a policeman? In the US, I would say officer. You can either say, I'll write this now, and I'll make it bigger, shotel, or gvirti ha-shoteret. Okay, depending on gender. Adoni ha-shoter, or, right? Gvilti ha-shoteret, depending on their gender. Adoni ha-shoter to a male, to a policeman. Gvilti ha-shoteret, policewoman. By the way, folks, we do have what we call the basic laws, Chok HaYesod in Hebrew. I see a lot of people trying to lecture me and each other about constitutionality in Israel. There are plenty of other democratic countries much older than Israel that do not have a constitution. The UK is one of them, by the way. In Israel, we have the basic laws, which serve as the basis for a constitution. It is not a constitution, a chukah. However, they are considered they have the weight of that in Israel. Those of you who are trying to lecture me and others on other forms of that, please leave your politics and your ideology for another place. Right? Please explain the Border Patrol again, e.g. what do they do inside the country, like where the green line runs through the center of the country. It's basically that. Border Patrol is in charge of making sure people who aren't supposed to be in Israel don't get into Israel. That also gets complicated with regards to Israel's military control over parts of some people will call the West Bank, other people will call Judea and Samaria. I'm not getting into that in this class. Just know that the Border Patrol's mandate is to patrol those lines that often are more porous than others. And so you'll see them more noticeably in places like Jerusalem or along the Green Line, which is the armistice line in 1949. That's mainly their mandate. Is there a way to look up crime stats in an area we're considering living in? That's a great question. I'm going to look that up for you and provide that in the follow-up email. That's a really great question. Thank you for asking that. I'm actually going to save it so I make sure that you can look that up. But I believe you can look it up in the Central Bureau of Statistics, which is the national office, but I'll look into that. When gangs demand protection money, is that considered schita? Gangs, mafia, that's schita. Protection money is extortion, that's schita. I was wondering why the Hebrew uses the word sanegol for defense, which is also used in the Talmud, indeed, but not the Talmudic form katigol for accuser prosecutor. I don't know. Honestly, I have heard katigol before, but you don't normally hear it. It's praklitut or praklit for the prosecutor. What would be the equivalent in Hebrew to the English word safety and security? Great question. I'm going to write that here. I'm actually going to write that back up here. Safety, add it to our list here. Betichut. Betichut is safety. Like for example, betichut badrachim, safety on roads, road safety. Right? Betichut is safety, bitachon is security. Can you please add the new word vowels to the new words on security? I love when you guys ask me questions, and thank you for saying please and thanks. Yes, before this goes out, I will do it. I can't run the automatic Nikud generator while I'm adding new words here, but yes, I'll be sure to send it out before, add it in before we do that. Okay. Are there separate traffic police units? Usually not. Usually the police are also in charge of traffic. They sometimes will have specialized police units that do it, but the police is in charge of patrolling traffic as well. Sometimes it's also given to the municipality to do. Okay. Can you talk about paying for a Rav-Kav and trains and buses and transportation as a visitor in the future? This may be a review. We have gone over that before, but I will note that to do in a future class. Hitchayvut from the route to secure Leavteach? No. No, 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 no. The route of Leavteach is the same route as these other ones. It's got that aleph at the beginning because we have a series of verbs in Hebrew that basically they run out. We only have what we call binyanim, the forms that verbs take. We only have 7 of them. So to create a new form, especially for new words, we either add an aleph or a shin at the beginning of that shoresh, so we can use existing ones. So leavteach, those of you who are a little bit more advanced, this is binyan PL, and the root is aleph bet tet chet, but it's based on bet tet chet, like all these other ones. Okay, hitchayvut, excuse me, hitchayvut, and I'm not including this in the vocabulary that will go out. Hitchayvut, right? The root is chet yud bet. Chayav comes from the same root as chayav and chova. I believe it's either chet yud bet or, sorry, chet vav bet. Okay, that's the root for hitchayvut. It has nothing to do with lavteach, other than it contains two of the same letters in a different order. Shitul, is that like mitug or bitul? Yes, it's the act of doing something, the act of policing. Like shiput is the act of judging. Right? In the UK, it is part of the job of the police to give you directions to help you find your way. Does that apply here? If you ask politely, a policeman or woman will probably help you get directions, but that's not their mandate. Their mandate is achifat hachok, enforcing the law and patrolling. But I'm sure if you ask nicely, they would help if they can. Name for organized crime, it's the same as in, it's a literal translation, which when words are not a literal translation that you can look up, I'm not going to include them here, but it's pshia me'orgenet. It's literally organized crime. Crime is pshia or pesha, me'orgenet, organized. Right? How do you say pickpocket? A kayas? Does that happen a lot? Not particularly. There are places more heavily trafficked than others, but that's not a normal crime that you hear a lot about, at least. Okay. Okay, we are at the top of the hour, so we are unfortunately out of time. First off, toda rabah, thank you all for joining. Second, a copy of this recording will be sent out in the next day or two, along with the spreadsheet, along with the vowels and transliteration of the words we just went through and added to the list. Next week's class is going to be a review of one of the more difficult parts for those learning Hebrew, which is direct and indirect objects. Or if that's too grammatically nerdy for you to sound, what is a direct versus an indirect object? First off, that's a sign you need to join our class. This is how to use the article et. We're going to go through et, hopefully that it makes complete sense to you. Everything you need to know about et, also how et conjugates, very important. But next week is all about direct and indirect objects in sentences. Once again, toda rabah, thank you all for joining. Hope to see you all next week, and stay tuned to your email for news on Cafe Oleh conversations, and a lot more coming from us. Until next week, toda rabah and lehitraot. Take care.